Y'all, I was so pleasantly surprised right now that I saw that we're on episode 60 of the Positioning to Profit podcast. And in full transparency, I've been going through some quote unquote writer's block. And I sat at my desk here and I just got inspired with this thought about what's happening right now in society at a global level. And I have been inspired to relay that to your marketing. So stay tuned. Here we go. Hey there, I'm Patty Dominguez. You're about to discover what it means to position your brand and your business to stand out. This show explores the stories of small business owners just like you who are bringing their message out to the world and impacting their tribe. So if you want to take your business to a category of one status, then hang with me because this podcast shares everything you need to know about how to be more prolific with your brand so that you can have more profits. Okay, thank you so much for being here and checking out this episode, number 60. I am so excited. Okay, in full transparency, I want to give a very special thank you to my team, to Charlotte and Christy, because every week they're like, all right, Patty, what's the podcast for the week? And I have been struggling. I've been so consumed with my signature program and completing it and all these other elements and all the things. And I've just been spinning. And so as a result, I completely delayed on creating the podcast. And so, oh my gosh, I've been so struggling. I've been so resistant to the whole thing. I feel like it's been the equivalent of writer's block, right? If I were a writer, I would be in that mode where I'm like, no matter what I do, because I actually sat in front of the computer here and trying to record a podcast and I just couldn't find my flow. And then yesterday I was in the middle of like, okay, let me get this out. And then our power went out. I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, what is happening with my whole podcasting journey here? But I have found my flow today and I was thinking, and I just sat in silence. And if you ever are looking for how to create ideas, if you're feeling stuck, I know better. And I just sat in silence. I just sat there and I was just thinking, I'm like, okay, what can I write about? What's really, really inspiring me today? And I got a download, and it's all about this us versus them. So this us versus them theory is something that produces hostilities, and it, with everything going on right now at a global level, politically, what's going on socially, it has this us versus them undertone, as I'm sure you are experiencing yourself, right? So what that does is it produces hostilities, and so regardless of your views, because this, I want you to understand, this is an apolitical podcast in that I'm not sharing any of my political views. That is completely inconsequential here. So I want to share, though, the power of this concept of us versus them. And so I was taking a look a little bit about where does that whole ideology come from? And according to Psychology Today, one reason for our need to identify to the us versus them idea is that our self-esteem comes partly from this group think, the belongingness that we want to be a part of something, a part of a community, a part of people who believe what we believe, right? And so we need to feel good about our group to feel good about ourselves. And what I started to really recognize is like this layered identity where our worldviews are justified by the group that holds that same interpretation, and it makes us correct. So I was like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense to me, because if you really think about this whole us versus them attitude, it is so prevalent, not just in politics. Think about it. You can be Republican or Democrat here in the US, keto or vegan, right? Or carnivore or vegan. You could be a dog person or a cat person. Cubs versus White Sox. That's a shout out to my Chicago peeps. Coke versus Pepsi, chocolate or vanilla. Taking sides can have serious consequences. And as I was thinking about this whole us versus them mentality, I remembered a story of what had happened. This was in the mid-90s. I lived in Madrid, Spain for a few years. And the soccer team there, Real Madrid, they have some diehard fans. And at the time, I'd gone to a game. And at the game I attended, the rival team was literally so pissed off. They were so upset that they had lost the game. And I will say this about Europeans with their football, soccer. They are so passionate. And one of the fans on the other side from the other team as we were walking out of the stadium, he saw a kid, like this young kid. He could have probably been around 11 or 12, and he was waving his Real Madrid flag, just like waving it and so proud that his team had won. And these guys like just, swatted from the hands of the young team the flag, and they're like, yeah, you can shove that sign right up where the sun don't shine type of thing. And they were so upset that he was waving around his flag. And at the moment, I remember it so significant to me because I was like, I gasped at the sheer anger and this action that they took against this young teen. They were so consumed by this fact that this kid was waving this flag. But it was more than that. Now that I look at the us versus them, this is about, it was challenging. It was so impactful because it was challenging. It was an attack on their identity. It was an attack on their community. And that's where this us versus them passionate process comes into play. So now it just really makes so much sense, right? So and I'm certainly not justifying any of those actions at all, but what it does go to show you is just how this us versus them mentality can be so all-encompassing to someone. It could just consume somebody because they're justifying so much of what they believe in, and so they mean it wholeheartedly. And so let's bring this back to you and your marketing. So what if you could use this concept of us versus them for good, right? Like one of my early mentors, Kurt Molly, he's leveraged this concept in part. He doesn't call it this us versus them, but he challenges his followers, his community, to quote unquote use propaganda for good. And we know there's so much propaganda out there for bad. So he's flipped the script on it and he said, hey, let's use propaganda for good. And that's an example, a really amazing example of this us versus them mentality. And it's such that it's been really significant for the growth of his community. Now, I have taken on that attitude for quite some time in that I believe wholeheartedly that as an entrepreneur, I do have an us versus them mentality when it comes to having a job, a job. I just don't ever want to go there again. So I absolutely hold on to that belief that to me, being an entrepreneur is the coolest career that you can have. So I've made a very conscious decision, back to the whole us versus them mentality, as I was thinking about how I can apply that to my work, how I apply that to the ethos of my business. And I've made a very conscious decision that I will only work with business owners who have a product or service that is adding something of value to the world. Now, they may sound woo-woo or hippie or whatever. I proudly wave that flag because I am all about good versus evil, versus a product or service that is doing nothing for the planet, nothing for the universe or for the energy of the universe, right? So if you're a taker, then go on with your bad self because we're probably not a good fit, right, to work together. But if you understand the laws of reciprocity, well, then we'll be a great fit together. So that's an example of us versus them. I see it as what I stand for and what I'm not willing to compromise. That's my version of us versus them. And us versus them is a concept that you can leverage in your own marketing for yourself. So really ask yourself, what is it that you stand for? But really with conviction. What do you want? Who do you want to attract in your business? What are your business's core values? See, this is one of the key principles that I talk about. Not only I have learned the importance of it through my mentor, Jim Fortin, but it's also something I talk about in my own signature course, Positioning to Profit. Because if you're in the game, you want to be in the game to create longevity for yourself. And then you'll care about these concepts such as core values. Because here's the deal. Anyone can be hot for a season, right? Like those entrepreneurs that you see that are kind of a flash in the pan and the equivalent of a one-hit wonder. But it's a true entrepreneur who believes in something, who is willing to stand up for the us versus them mentality for good, the one who is in the game because it's a mission that is meaningful to them. Because I believe that consciously minded entrepreneurs have a true calling that they must get out into the world, in spite of what others will say or how crazy it may seem to other people. We have this calling. That's an us versus them. So this is such a great example of building a community around the things that matter to you. So think about an us versus them approach to what you are creating in your business. And really, let's use this concept of us versus them for good. Why? Because I believe with every fiber of my being that your message matters. And I mean that. So if this resonates with you, share it with your friends. Leave me a rating and review. I so appreciate that. And I'm excited. We're 60 episodes in. So yeah, I'll be bringing some more interviews to you of some amazing entrepreneurs who are doing beautiful things in the world. Okay, and one last thing. I have a new mini course. It's called pivotyourpositioning.com, which includes a mind map and a little mini course on positioning. So if this resonates with you and you're starting to recognize just how valuable, just how significant positioning can be for your own business, then you absolutely deserve to check out pivotyourpositioning.com. That's pivotyourpositioning.com. We'll get a simple mind map as well as a little mini course that explains more about the premise around the P2P framework and how it works. And there it is. Ladies and gents, thank you so much for checking out this episode. I look forward to continuing the episodes. I love podcasting, and you'll just have to forgive me. Excuse the block I had, but I do believe I'm back. So I'll be sharing even more goodness as it comes to creating more positioning prowess coming your way. All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for checking out the Positioning to Profit podcast. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. And also, it would mean the world to me if you would take a quick moment to leave a rating and review on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcast player. It really helps to get the word out about the podcast and, of course, the featured guests. And lastly, please make sure to connect with me on social media. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, I'm on all of them, and use hashtag positioning to profit so that I can search you out and connect that way too. All right. Thanks so much. See you next time.